It has begun.
It has begun.
Here we are.
In the beginning,
Let me tell you a
was
first
the
world
Word.
problem.
There's no
Tell you
doubt.
my first world problem. I have so many first world problems, though. I'm gonna
Oh,
tell you
okay,
what.
yeah.
Okay. So, the air conditioning is too strong.
That is a first world problem.
Right? Right?
Not
Yeah.
the air conditioning's out. The air conditioning is too strong.
It's too cold. Right? There's there are I would say there are three things that I've come to really disdain as a pastor.
Okay.
One is HVAC systems
Okay.
and trying to get them to operate the way that they're supposed to. Like in the winter, it feels often like the heat isn't kicking on where it's supposed to or when it's supposed to. And then with the AC, my issue here has been not that like when the AC has gone down, it hasn't been a problem. Like something is broken, but the issue that I've had here is like the distribution doesn't make any sense. So like there was one small office that Paula,
the
my
Arctic.
director of evangelization, like she sits in her office with a blanket because it just all of the air conditioning goes to her office for some reason. But then like you can feel the humidity in other parts of the office, and I'm like, I don't understand. And we've been trying to get it fixed, and it's like it's just brutal. So I hate that. I hate fire and burglar alarms because fire and burglar alarms tend to just go off for no reason, and that's always a pain. And then I just don't like doing the fundraising stuff. It's no fun asking for money.
Yeah, no.
And unfortunately, those are all things that I have to deal with because it's part of the job. So
and you didn't sign up to be a fundraiser.
Yeah, I didn't. I know people
or at least
who have
it wasn't
chosen
in the
that.
main, Yeah.
It wasn't part of the vocational discernment. That much I can tell you. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. I'm going to share
It's
with you my
fine.
first world problem now that we're on that.
I would love to know it. Yeah.
So what you will see right here is a St. Paul Center mug. But
very nice.
You might not realize that it says biblical theology because the letters are coming off because our dishwasher is too strong. So my mug is too clean. It's clean even in the areas I don't want it to be clean.
Look, I want to accompany you in this time of pain.
Yeah.
I'm here for you.
I don't know that I'll ever get over it, Father Sam.
No.
I don't know if I'll ever get
here.
over it.
I am here with
that,
you. I'm
or
here
the
for
fact
you.
that my laugh just there sounded like a dying horse. So one of those two. Well, speaking of suffering, that's a good segue into our topic today.
Okay.
I think that this is actually going to be another nice continuation of our topics, that we've been covering.
Okay.
So 2 weeks ago we covered Saint Therese and confidence in prayer. Last week we covered consolation, desolation, kind of like the Ignatian approach to prayer. Right. I mean, we didn't get super deep into it. We didn't go through the spiritual exercises, but we covered those concepts. Right?
Time out. Excuse me. I think that everything that we said was profound and worthy of significant reflection.
I didn't say
and I'm
it was
sure
good. I just said we didn't go too deep into it.
I'm sure that our listeners sat there every once in a while needing to hit pause so that they could take a deep breath and marvel at how profound our thinking was. I think that's definitely what happened.
Yeah.
I'm
especially the part where we determined that some desolation isn't spiritual, or some consolation isn't spiritual, like the Mets winning the World Series.
Sometimes that's the mind-blowing spot, okay? It just happens. No, I'm very seriously, I'm grateful to you for recapping this so that I can remember what we talk about. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. It's also it is in peace for me. But this week we're going to be covering suffering in prayer. I guess we're like the real launching pad is something I was reading in Romans. So I've been reading through Romans. I really like Romans. And in Romans 8, we are told that we are not given the spirit of fear. So I'm going to go ahead and read it itself, because why paraphrase when I have a Bible right in front of me?
Or we could do it like this. We could say, hey, listener, hit pause and pick this podcast up again once you've had a chance to sit down and read Romans chapter 8 instead of
I wasn't going to read
listening
the whole
to
thing.
Matt stumble. Oh, the whole. Okay.
I was going to read like 3 sentences. Father Sam, it's a podcast. People listen to this in the car. Come on. Come on, pull yourself together, Father Sam.
Okay.
All right,
Matt's a
thank
strong
you.
reader. He can do this.
I can do this, okay? All right, so in Romans chapter 8, it's verses 12 through 17, 5 verses, okay? Not a huge
Okay.
deal, okay? It says, "So then, brothers, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live." There's the strong reader in me. "For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father." So that particular verse, that verse in particular is what I wanted to focus on, but it continues, "The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him, in order that we may also be glorified with him." So I was kind of moved by a couple of things here. So the first is that we're given this spirit of adoption and not a spirit of fear. Now, in peace, I guess one of the reasons I think this works really well with what we've been talking about is because Saint Therese, as confirmed, I had thought this was true, but it was confirmed in John Paul II's declaration of her as a doctor of the church. He brings this up. That Saint Therese kind of combated like the lingering effect of Jansenism.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jansenism definitely includes this idea of like God is this, he's almost like a fear monger, you know what I mean? Like you are to go to God with fear and trembling, and not in a proper filial fear, right? Like a fear that would go with that spirit of slavery. But St. Paul here, like St. Therese is basically copying St. Paul. Let's be honest, okay? St. Paul says we can say Abba, Father, and like her whole way is the way of spiritual childhood, right? So I was very moved by that. But then, like, not even 2 verses later, he's talking about how our being heirs, with Christ is contingent on our willingness to suffer with him. And I think that potentially on the surface, these things kind of clash, because you've got this spirit of adoption, this spirit of childhood, and also the call to suffer. And I say on the surface because, like, I know that we're called to pick up our cross, but at the same time, I can tell you as a father, I'm going to be honest, right? Like, I am constantly asking my wife's and my children's guardian angels to watch us and to keep us from suffering. But also like that feels very natural. And I would argue correct. Like it would be very odd for me to wish suffering upon them. And yet here we have it, like this contingency. So I think maybe this is the first question, that maybe this is like the thing that can set the ground for us from which we can build. What's the role of Christian suffering?
Yeah, well, before we get to that, even I would say, I don't know that what Paul is doing is placing a contingency on this. Like,
Okay.
In other words, provided that we suffer with him, as St.
Mm-hmm.
Paul says, he doesn't mean that we therefore cannot pray for our friends, our family members, our loved ones, that we can't pray for God's protection and divine grace. In fact, the opposite. Like,
I mean, doesn't St. Paul do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
Of course we would ask for God's
Right.
protection and divine grace. Of course
Right.
we would.
Yeah.
What he's saying is that when those sufferings come your way, if we're only concerned about the flesh, and that's like the beginning of Romans 8, right?
Right.
If we're only concerned about the flesh, if our only concern is our comfort and the way that we feel in this body, or if our only concern is about material things or earthly things, worldly things, worldly goals and ambitions, well, then we're really going to be off track because we're so focused on the wrong stuff. But when we are focused on God, and when we've placed ourselves in God's hands, then whatever sufferings might come our way, we suffer with Christ, as opposed to I'm so focused on my own comfort. I'm so focused on my own bodily sense that I'm caught up in it. So it's a contingency, but it's not a contingency that like you cannot therefore pray for safety or for health.
Right.
It's rather that we we're living out the fullness of our adoption when we face everything with God. Just as, like, if you adopt a child,
Hmm.
um, you live out the fullness of that child's adoption when you face everything with that child. And
Yeah.
they live out the fullness of their adoption when they share in your family life, when it's not like, okay, we've adopted this child, but now we're going to put the adopted child at a separate table in the
Hmm.
house and they eat with a different group of people. Like, we have natural children and we have adopted children, and the
Right.
natural children sit at the table with mom and dad. The adopted children sit over here at this
Yeah.
separate table. Like, that would
Yeah.
be that
That's
would
a
be
mean
insane.
thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's not
So,
not very kind.
what do you think of when you think of a family that has adopted a child? They have brought this child into their life, and this child shares completely
Hmm.
in the life of that family.
Right.
Um, and what that means is that the child is going to share completely in the life of that family, even if a member of the family is suffering.
Yeah.
And in the moments when the members of that family are joyful, like, or if that kid themselves, that adopted child suffers, like, the parents are going to be there in the
Hmm.
hospital with that child in the midst of suffering, or
Yeah.
they're going to experience the heartbreak when something goes wrong for that kid. Like, there's no, that's the fullness of adoption, right?
Hmm.
And so we
Hmm.
live out the fullness of our own adoption when we suffer with Christ, because how is it that we've been adopted? But by the very fact that he's brought us in, like, he's taken
Hmm.
our sufferings on himself. When we try to, like, I'm going to handle my suffering by myself, I don't need God, I don't need to do any of this, or uh, I accept Jesus as the teacher and as the miracle worker, but I reject the idea of the cross. And remember,
Yeah.
what does St. Paul also say? We preach Christ crucified, a
Yeah.
stumbling block to Jews and an absurdity to Gentiles.
Mm.
Right? And so the idea of Christ suffering is the thing that people were rejecting. No, Jesus couldn't have suffered. Like, the Messiah can't possibly be the one.
Yeah.
Even that close in history, even, like, just in those immediate years following the crucifixion and the resurrection, there's people who
Hmm.
are saying, no, well, that can't be it, right? That can't possibly be it. And he says, no,
Right.
we preach Christ crucified. We talk about
Right.
the suffering of Christ. And then Bishop Barron is always famous for talking about how the idea that Jesus is Lord, uh, Christo Kyrios, right, as opposed to Kaiser Kyrios, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Caesar is Lord. To say Christ is Lord is like, we're going to hold up the cross, the instrument of torture, the instrument of death, this sign of horrible
Mm.
suffering. We're going to hold that up as our. This is what Paul is talking about when he says, so long as we suffer with him, it's because we need to be in that place where we accept the cross of Christ, not just for ourselves, but that it happened and that it happened for us.
So, I mean, there's a ton there.
Yeah.
There's a ton there, and you just knocked it out of the park.
Woo.
Yeah, nice job. You would belong on the Mets. Is that a compliment? So there's, so, like, the familial aspect. I've
Mhm.
not thought of that before. That, like, you're called to suffer with Christ, um, and in a sense, it's that He's drawing you in. So I love that.
Yeah.
One of the other ways that I've thought about it is because, like, he's talking about the deeds of the flesh, and I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, but having read through Romans a few times at this point, it seems to me that a lot of that also has to do with, like, these are the sins you're committing, and so in a sense, when he's saying leave behind the deeds of the flesh, and take up the spirit, and you're called to suffer with him, it's like that could be the suffering that comes to you because you choose to persevere in faith instead of not persevering in faith.
Mhm.
And so the contingency is also, in a sense, like, well, are you abandoning the faith? Are you proclaiming that you are a Christian, but living a life under the law, right? And he talks, he gives that contradiction between, I mean, what's the exact verse? Where he starts talking about the law and, let me see if I can find it.
Well, yeah. The
He
law
says, like,
weakened
but
by.
if Christ is in you, although the body is dead because of sin, right? So, like, are
Mhm.
you sinning, right? Or do you have the spirit is life because of righteousness? So, like, what's the path of life you're taking is what I mean. And so
Yeah.
when he draws that contradiction, the suffering that we have to, in a sense, embrace, allows us to be if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him. That suffering is the suffering we are willing to take on because we don't embrace sin. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, by choosing Romans today, you have chosen one of the most profound of St. Paul's letters.
Yes, yes.
Like one of the most spiritually rich and theologically profound
it's dense
things ever written. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
And more than once I have been given as a spiritual direction point, like read this from Paul's letter to the Romans, and like you might need to read it 100 times to understand it, but spend some time with this because it's really, really important. And what he's writing there is the whole letter, the whole entire letter is just full of these insights or these things. So there's countless places where you could pause to meditate. So that's I think the first thing. But then realizing what is it when we're talking about the flesh? We're not just talking about sin, although that's probably the biggest element.
Okay.
So let's start with talking about sin.
Okay.
Sin is always somehow going to be about my own pleasure, my own preferences, having my way, having the thing that I want. And so when we talk about the flesh, we're speaking about those merely earthly or carnal desires, those things that are just like mine, they're bodily, they're physical. But having those desires is not in and of itself sinful, right? Like you become hungry and you desire food. You have not sinned by wanting food. Right? This is a normal thing and it's actually healthy, right? And then the way that you eat helps you to nourish the body that God has given to you. And we know that this body, this flesh has been redeemed by the precious blood of Christ. And we know that God has elevated our humanity to an infinite dignity by taking on our human flesh. And so therefore this gift of the body and everything that goes with it, the desires of the body and everything, there's something very good because in the beginning, God created man and God created man good. And so we know that there's a goodness to this natural ordering that we have. However, we also know that in our humanity, in our fallen nature, we have fallen short of the glory of God and we have fallen short of this gift. And therefore, we don't always see, recognize, understand, or live in the truth of the flesh. And so the flesh becomes something dominant. The desires of the flesh take over. And we begin to look for the satisfaction of those natural desires in a way that's disordered. And so instead of eating a nutritious breakfast, I have 4 or 5 donuts because the donuts are sweet and they taste good. Right. And that's not a healthy way for me to live. Now, I use an example that's relatively innocuous on purpose. Because there's obviously there's also those ways that I go looking for, or any one of us goes looking for satisfaction of desires that's well outside of the realm of what's moral, what's good, what's upright and everything else. And we see that all the time. It happens. And therefore we realize like when I don't have the flesh, like this body really truly under control, I struggle. What happens if I'm going to get the body under control though? I'm going to suffer a little bit. Right? And that suffering is not because somebody else is attacking me or I've become ill or sick. That suffering comes from the fact that I have to sometimes discipline my senses. I have to do without.
Mortification.
That's not always a comfortable place to be.
Mortification is called mortification.
Exactly.
There's a pain involved.
And it's very real, and it's not anything other than this very real experience of needing to discipline my flesh. And so in that way, that's what we're talking about with the flesh. But there's also, I was kind of struck by this because, 10 minutes ago when you told me that we should talk about Romans 8, I looked it up real quick. No, I'm just kidding.
I texted you this morning, okay?
No, it just in verse 2, for the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has freed you from the law of sin and death. And then in verse 5, it says, for those who live according to the flesh are concerned with the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, things of the Spirit. Basically that the more focused we are on the flesh, the more focused we are on death. And that kind of struck me as odd, right? Because if I'm hungry, I want to eat. I want to live. But then I started thinking about this. This is going a little bit further than what St. Paul would have ever talked about. Okay.
Okay.
But if you look at developmental psychology,
Okay.
the first anxiety that they'll talk about is death anxiety.
Yes, and just as a brief like punch here, we talked about this with Dr. Greg on
Yeah.
like episode 10 of The Tangent. He talked about how the
Right.
fundamental fear is death.
Yeah.
So please keep going, but I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, because if we think about the death anxiety is that somehow some need that I have is not going to be met and will never be met, and I will die. Now, it's not something that we think of consciously. So a
Mhm.
baby cries because the baby's hungry, or because the baby has gas. This discomfort makes the baby feel like something's wrong and I'm not okay. I'm not safe. And so the baby
Mhm.
cries, and mom or dad picks the baby up and burps the baby, gets rid of the gas, or mom or dad feeds the baby, and now the baby is satisfied. That
Mhm.
pain, like hunger, that the emptiness of the stomach is something that you feel, and it can feel like a certain sort of pain. And so
Mhm.
in that place of hunger, like i- in that pain, there's this like crying out, I don't want to die. I don't want to be hurt. Now extend that much more broadly, and you start to realize that a lot of these fears are, or the different anxieties that we have, if you trace them all the way back, it's somehow I am not safe. And if I am
Right.
not safe, then my life is in danger.
Right.
Now, of course, we know that not every kind of danger or not every kind of discomfort points to death. But the more we're focused on the flesh and the desires of the flesh, the less we are focused on the truth of life, because
Mhm.
we're so locked in on this. This becomes the only thing that matters to us, that
Mhm.
really we're not living for the pleasure and the joy of a good meal, the pleasure and the joy of those things of the flesh that like we naturally desire. We're living because we're afraid that without them we'll die. I can't live without X, Y, or Z.
Mhm.
Um, this is like one of my the wildest questions that priests get or seminarians will get, uh, as you're going through formation and preparing for a life of celibacy.
Mhm.
The question, well, how could you possibly live without sex?
Mhm. Mhm.
As though it's this utterly impossible thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And most often it's asked uh, by people who are not yet married.
Mhm.
It's asked by teenagers, by college students. Now, there
Mhm.
might be sexual activity happening and everything, but I'm like, are you alive right now? And they say, yeah. And I'm like, well, you're not having sex right now, right? And they're like, they're really thrown off by that.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
like,
yeah.
you're living without that right now. So all of us are capable of this. All of us are
Yeah.
capable of living without certain things, right?
Yeah.
But then you start to realize, if that's the only thing that I want, if that's the only reason I'm living, what if the only thing I was living for was a Big Mac?
Right.
I'm just living for the next meal or for this particular kind of food. That's my purpose. Something's off about my being, isn't it? Right? And if I'm focused only on like I've just got to get to that thing, because otherwise it's the thought of not having it that makes me fearful, or it's the thought of not having it that. So what I'm actually doing, as much as I might say, oh, it's all about just living, man, just like living your life and enjoying things. What it really is, it's the fear that if I don't have those things, I'll die.
Mm.
Like what we're really
So
living with then is like the fear. If we're focused on the flesh entirely, then the fear is, without this, I can't possibly really live. So then subconsciously our focus is on death instead.
right. So there's a couple of things that I think that are particularly interesting that you said. The first is, well, before I forget it, let's just address that last thing, which is like how, I mean, that's like perfectly integrated with what he says later on in Romans 8, right? And we haven't been given that spirit of fear. Like to be a Christian is to not live by that spirit of fear. Right. And so we're quite literally called out of that. And that's awesome. Like that's good news, you know, that's awesome, you know? The other thing that really struck me that I think is implicit, right? Because you said that the flesh, that's not just sin, that's also these other aspects of the body, and not everything in the body is bad. As a matter of fact, let me rephrase that. The body is good, and there are these like aspects of concupiscence we suffer from.
Yeah.
And so it like fundamentally the body is good, and because the body is good, that's why the sacrifice on the cross in a bodily fashion was a sacrifice at all, right? Like if the body wasn't good and Christ died on the cross in that bodily fashion, like I understand the metaphysics of like this infinite being offers himself in sacrifice. He has the divine nature and the human nature. He bridges the impossible gap, right? Like but specifically in that fashion, it's the goodness of the body that makes bodily sacrifice worth anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so like being able to frame this whole thing in the goodness of the body can, I guess maybe, and maybe I'm jumping too far, but like kind of remove any like Gnostic tendency that might come from this. That is the body is bad. This like dualistic tendency that might come from misinterpreting it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's a fear. We hear the word, or we read that St. Paul is saying that if you're in the flesh, there's this death, there's sin. So we have to like get out of the flesh. So we separate then, but that's not really what Paul is talking about.
Yeah,
he's rather talking about this idea that when we're in control, ordering our desires, and when we have the Spirit, we function in this body. Fast forward, like what does Paul say about his many privations and sufferings? Right? He catalogs all the different ways that he has suffered for the sake of the gospel.
Yeah.
But every single way that he has suffered for the sake of the gospel has been in the body.
Yeah.
He talks about being beaten with rods, shipwrecked, scourged, stoned, all these different places where he's been bound in chains, he's been exiled, he's been sent in all these like crazy places, and yet he says through in times of hunger, in times of satisfaction, in times of distress, in times of health, like whatever it is, I know that Christ has conquered. And what he's able to say there is like, the reason I'm here, the reason I'm not afraid of death, like of this flesh coming to its end, is because I know Christ. The reason that I can endure all of this suffering is not because I am so physically strong or because my body can handle it. I endure all of this for the sake of Christ, who first suffered for me. And this is the spiritual bond, the communion that he has with the Lord that allows him to say, I know who I am, I know whose I am, I know what I am, I know where I stand in all of this. And so when we're talking about this, we're not talking about denial because everything about your body or everything about those physical, natural desires that you have is evil.
Yeah.
Rather, we're talking about the idea that we're bringing them together. And the church has always been about this. There's a reason that Jansenism needs to be condemned, right?
Yeah.
Because Jansenism separates body and spirit. And then there's other variations of this, right? So there's a moral rigorism to Jansenism. Like the body is bad, so we have to like constantly discipline the body. The spirit is the thing that we need. There's another kind that says the body, there's another, I can't think of what it's called right now. I apologize. I'm blanking on it because this was not where I was expecting to go. So tangent is good, but now I can't think. And that's, anyway, but like, it doesn't matter what you do in the body, do anything, because the body doesn't matter. Only the spirit matters.
Would it be quietism maybe?
I don't know. But it's like this idea that you can therefore do whatever you want with the body.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter. So it's it's a devaluing of the body, but really it's an elevating of the desires of the body.
Ironically. I mean, it's
exactly.
wild.
Exactly.
Yeah, talk about a contradiction.
As long as the spirit is in order. But our humanity doesn't work that way because we are body and soul.
Right.
We can't get past that duality.
Yeah.
We can't get past the fact that that in ourselves, both body and soul are going to find this connection, this unity, and therefore they're going to work together. They're not at odds with one another. Like they're just not. But I can see where sometimes like my desires aren't actually good for me. Like, so
Yeah.
when I see the box of Krispy Kreme donuts and I desire the box, okay, but is it good for me to have the box? No,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, it's not. Is it like, was it terrible or wrong for me to say, I want that? Well, no.
Hmm.
But is that desire rightly ordered? No. No, I need to rightly order that desire. I need to discipline that desire.
Yeah. So I'm really glad this is where we went. Because there's so many different things to say. The first is like, just to give an example and reiterate what you just said. It would be like saying something like, my spirit is in order and therefore drunkenness doesn't matter, you know, or like, my spirit is in order and therefore fornication, not a sin, you know, like, it's like, no, that's like, there's so obviously sins related to the flesh. So like, you have to kind of see them in that integrated way. It's almost like
Hmm.
impossible not to. Um, but the reason, I think so I think we've come at it from two angles. So the first is like, you're talking about, admittedly, in the tamer examples that you're probably prudent to use, right? Like the full box of Krispy Kreme, not enough. Or like, shouldn't go, not enough. The opposite,
It's
too many.
yes. It's fine to have one box of Krispy Kreme donuts all to yourself, but it becomes sinful when you
But-
have two boxes.
Exactly. But you see what I'm saying, right? But I think that there's also like a very prevalent cultural movement in like extreme health, right? That is embodying this thing you're saying, which is, when you focus on the flesh too much, you're thinking about death. And I'm going to give you an example, okay? This is also going to require a little bit of reading, but I ask you to bear with me, Father Sam.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay?
I'm here
There
for
is
it.
a man named Brian Johnson. And Brian Johnson is well known, as is this thing that he has done. So it is not an act of, sharing his private information. This is very public. It's in a Netflix documentary. Brian Johnson is the founder, I believe it's Venmo. He founded and then sold. So he's a bajillionaire. Make up any fake word you'd like to account for how much money he has, and that had constituted, I think. And he is famous for this phrase that he tries to live by, called the phrase is "Don't die." The motto is "Don't die." And I think I've brought him up on the show before. Renee and I have discussed him at length, and she has decided that I think about him too much. But that's because
She's probably right.
She's probably right. But that's because, in part, I think it's kind of hilarious, like that phrase. When I first told her about Brian Johnson and his "Don't Die" motto, the first words out of her mouth was, "Has someone told him this isn't going to work?" And I was like, that's a good point.
Yeah.
But tech entrepreneur Brian Johnson, okay, recently recruited his 17. This is from Fortune magazine, so take that as you will. But they're quoting Bloomberg at various points, right? His 17-year-old son Talmadge and his 70-year-old father Richard to join him in the world's first multi-generational plasma exchange. Okay. Last month, the trio headed to Resurgence Wellness, a medical spa in Texas, where, according to Bloomberg, the youngest Johnson got a full liter of his blood removed. For context, the human body has about 5 liters of blood, and separated into a batch of liquid plasma and then a batch of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Next up, Brian underwent the same process with the addition of having some of the same quantity of his son's plasma infused into his veins. Finally, the multimillionaire's, so not bajillionaire, multimillionaire, father had some of his own blood drained to make room for Brian's, quote, good stuff. And then it says here, and I'm going to add it because I think this is worth noting, the FDA advises against people infusing young blood because there's, quote, no compelling clinical evidence on its efficacy. Yet Johnson's medical team approved the procedure as a possible treatment for cognitive decline. In traditional medicine, plasma infusions are already used to treat a variety of conditions, including liver disease, blood disorders, burns, and are not used as a means of reverse aging, which is, of course, the thing that this man is trying to do, right? So it's like, I think that the point is that he, to me, right, he is like the epitome of the modern movement that I think borders on transhumanism. I would love to do an episode where we interviewed an actual expert about transhumanism, knowing that I'm not even remotely qualified to speak about it. I don't think that you are as well. No
believe it or
offense.
not, I know nothing about that. Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
like at a minimum, there is an observation
like-
one can make, which is
So wait. Is transhumanism the idea like we can meld body and machine and
to an
sort
extent.
of like create
To an
a
extent.
new form of humanity,
I think
like
to
an
an
elevated form of humanity?
So I think that would be the extreme version of it. I think the less extreme version of it would say that we can leverage technology to basically not die. Like we can defeat disease and aging through technology. Now, I don't know that necessarily means you become a cyborg, or whatnot. But I do think that any concept that leads to that end, anything that leads to that end would fall under transhumanism, I think.
If the movies have taught us anything, it's that
That doesn't work.
becoming a cyborg is not always the best.
No.
RoboCop, RoboCops 1 through 3, really. I mean, brilliant cinematic
about the
masterpieces,
remake?
of course. Yeah, have not seen the remake. I've only seen the originals.
I've actually never seen the originals either, but I know the concept, obviously.
But there's something about like it's pretty gratuitous. And that's kind of the whole point, is just like, what if a guy became partly a robot and then was just given guns for arms?
Yeah. Right.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
But all right. So all I'm trying to get at, Father Sam, is I think that there's this growing movement to combat aging, right?
Yeah.
But at the core of that movement is really the desire to combat suffering, right? So like, because like you said, right, when you trace these things down, it eventually ends up with a fear of death.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, I want to know, as someone who has, in his YouTube endeavors, ventured into the space of science-based lifting, and is like intrigued by things, but has not yet participated in any of the crazy diets, like a carnivore diet or like a vegan. I'm not really interested in a vegan diet, but something like where you only eat meat. It's like, what is that? And then people report like, well, I lost 70 pounds, started gaining muscle despite not changing my workout routine. It's like, wow, that's wild, And they're like, I'll feel 10, 15 years younger. It's like, oh my gosh, And for a lot of people, it has worked to cure certain diseases. I am not a doctor. Do not listen to my advice. My point is that, like, this is an interesting topic because it begs the question of, like, when is too far? What is an inordinate desire? What is an inordinate desire to escape suffering, considering that St. Paul has taught us this thing,
Yeah.
Again, realizing
I think,
it's not just you can't suffer, or what you said before,
Yeah. The idea of I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to diet. I'm going to find something so that I can be healthy. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be healthy. There's nothing immoral about that. I know. But there's also nothing that's not part of God's design in that. God gave us God gave us food, and He teaches us to eat. Like if you go and read Daniel, what happens when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are brought into the king of Babylon's service? At first, they're shown the food that they're going to have to eat, and they say, we can't eat this food because it's unclean. It doesn't fit within our dietary prescriptions that God has given to us. We look at the law of how we are to eat, which we would call kosher, and they say we can't eat this. So instead of giving us this portion of food that's supposed to come to us, just give us vegetables and water to drink. Don't give us wine. Don't give us any of this other stuff. Just give us vegetables and water. And what happens at the end of the week, or however long it is, the king's steward looks at them, and they look healthier and better fed than the ones who had been eating the portion sent out from the king's table. So he continued giving them the food that they requested instead of, this other stuff. And it's like they did it to be faithful to the law. But
Hmm.
we've seen people who do similar things, like I'm going to eat this food instead of this food. I'm going to eat the raw food, or I'm going to eat the healthier food. I'm going to eat the food that's been cooked and prepared differently instead of
Hmm.
eating everything fried in oil and grease, right?
Yeah.
And I'm
I'm gonna
choosing
cut out fried Oreos from my diet.
exactly. And by doing that, what they're doing is they're choosing the healthier option. Their
Yeah.
bodies benefit. Their minds might be sharper. They might feel better rested. They might be more alert. And of course, there's nothing bad about that. Of course, there's nothing wrong with it. We
I
might say,
mean,
I want
it's
to
not
be
just that;
healthy
it's
for
virtuous, isn't it?
exactly because I want to be healthy for what purpose? For the service of my children. I
Right.
want to be healthy for what purpose? So that I can effectively proclaim the gospel. Like I'm a priest. I
Mm.
need to make sure that I maintain my health
Yeah.
because if I'm going to be an effective evangelist, then I've got to be healthy. So I have to be careful. Like really
Yeah.
and truly, as a priest, I have to be careful because a lot of times our life can be a priest's life, especially in diocesan life and
Hmm.
parish life. We can end up doing an awful lot of office work where
Hmm.
we're sitting at a desk,
Hmm.
a lot of sitting with people. And there's nothing bad about sitting with people. Like I sit with people to offer counsel, to offer
Yeah. Yeah.
comfort.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
later this afternoon, I'll sit with somebody to help prepare for a funeral. So
Yeah.
you're doing these things that are important. But in terms of like the physical aspect, the physical
Hmm.
activity of it, it's not
Hmm.
very much. What that means is that I've got to be careful. Another thing that happens, this is a tangent on diocesan priesthood and like the way that we
Please.
live.
Yeah.
But very often you'll go into a rectory, and what you see in the rectory, like in the kitchen, you're going to see entenmann's
Hmm.
because we get the leftovers from whatever parish function there was.
Right.
And so somebody has like little donut holes at the parish function. Nobody really
Right.
cares, but then they send it so it doesn't get wasted. They send it back to the rectory. And so
Right.
you'll see like all these store-bought, super preservative
Mm.
laden food items
Interesting. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
end up back in the rectory. Then the other thing that happens is because priests' lives tend to be pretty occupied, especially if you're in an active parish. If you've got a quieter parish, it might not be quite the same way. But priests get caught up in a lot of things. They're kind of going meeting to meeting, event to event.
Hmm.
And many of us don't really know how to cook. Like I can cook for myself, but I'm embarrassed to show anybody the food that I make because I prepare food in such a way, like when I have to cook, I prepare food in such a way that I can eat it and not die. Like
Right.
my
That's
goal
good.
when I cook is don't die. And it's
You're
not
like
don't
Brian
die.
Johnson, but a
Yeah,
chef.
exactly. It's not don't die because you need food in order to live. It's don't die by eating food that will kill you. Right? Like don't give yourself food poison. That's my overarching
Right.
goal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's not something that I'm especially good at. I have a priest
Right.
friend who is a phenomenal cook,
Yes.
chef. I would
Yes. And
even I would
his
even
what's his
give him
name?
the Father Henry Zeno. He's a
Oh,
pastor up in the Diocese
I
of
just
Providence, Rhode
assumed
Island.
I thought you were
Uh,
talking about Father Suarez. Father Luke
Father
Suarez.
Father Luke Suarez is
Un
also an excellent cook.
Unbelievable cook.
He's great with it. Yeah. See, for guys like that, cooking is something that they do because they love it. They
Yeah,
enjoy
it's
it.
leisure. It's
It's
recreation.
leisure for them.
Yeah.
For me, that is not what cooking is a means to an end. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's not something that for me is especially enjoyable. Now,
You have a
I know that about
utilitarian
myself
relationship with cooking.
with food in general, I think. But see, this is the problem. A lot of priests, we get into that utilitarian attitude with
Mm.
food. So I need to eat. I need calories. So I'm going to eat this because it's there. We end up eating in a way that's really unhealthy because we eat
Right.
the processed food. We eat the
Right. Right.
ready-made food that just all we have to do is open the box or unwrap it and then we
Hmm.
can eat. And that can get us into some really negative habits with the way that we eat because we're
Yeah.
not
Sure.
choosing fresh food. We're not choosing food that's especially good for us. And then if you combine that with a life where there's a lot of sitting around, not sitting around like being lazy, but you're not moving a lot, or there's not a whole lot of time for
No. No.
exercise
There's
or something.
a whole element of your life as a priest is that like a portion of it is a desk job.
Right.
Yeah.
And then add to that what often happens. We get invited to go to dinners all the time. So like
Right. Right.
we're being fed by people. One of the great gifts, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
At Christmas time, people bring all the Christmas cookies that they've ever made and they give them to me. And it's beautiful. It's
Right.
really, truly beautiful. The only way I was able to get people to give me less cookies was a few years ago. I lived with two priests here who were both gluten free, and
Mm,
one was also dairy free. And so I was able to say, look, when you bring all of these cookies, I'm the only one who can eat them. And it's not physically possible for me to consume this much sugar and
right.
fat,
Yeah.
as delicious as it is. And so people slowed down on the amount of cookies they brought me, and they haven't figured out yet that my associate is just like me and can eat anything. He's just more disciplined. He's just more disciplined than me and won't, you know?
Right. Right. Right.
But here's the, like, if I try to take seriously my need to be healthy, I remember I was at a meeting once of priests, and I looked around the room, and I thought, like, my heart really broke because I was looking at a lot of guys who were physically suffering, like in a place of being physically unhealthy. And this happened to have been a meeting of mostly older priests. I was there
Hmm.
for I wasn't like part of the cohort that was meeting,
Hmm.
but I saw these guys in their physical suffering. But I started noticing how easy it is to get into unhealthy habits, and I was like, I can't prevent myself from aging,
Yeah.
right? I can't stop the aging process. I am my age, and that's it.
Hmm.
I can't change that. And if I try to look younger, then I've got a problem with vanity. Right?
Right. Right.
I don't want you to see my crow's feet. Like that. I've
Yeah.
got a problem with vanity. I got to be really careful about that.
Yeah.
But more than that, if I'm taking care of my body, if I'm trying to eat healthy, what's it for? Well, let's start at the most selfish possible level. I don't want to be sick. I don't want to have to take pills all my life.
Yeah.
I want to be healthy, right?
Yeah.
Let's make that a more noble purpose. Um, the people of God deserve a priest who is physically capable of ministering to their needs, not
Yeah.
somebody who's sick all the time, or whose life is so unhealthy that he doesn't have the physical energy required to be there for them. The
Hmm.
people also need somebody who's a witness, right? If if everything about my appearance looks like I don't take care of myself, whether
Mm.
that's I don't take care of myself physically or I don't take care of myself, like, we're not sure if Father has bathed this week. He should probably learn how to comb his hair, right?
Right.
Then there's sort of a false like a false humility. Like I have a beard, and my beard gets kind of crazy sometimes,
Hmm.
right? But like it would be a false humility if I just let it be scraggly and all over the place because I wanted people to see how simple I was. Like the
Mm.
CFRs comb their beards.
Well, that's I was just gonna
The
ask you
beard
that,
is a
right?
sign
Like,
of austerity.
what do you like? What do you make of that, right? Like, because I mean, they're friars and they're living a life of poverty, and I would
Mhm.
argue, like, I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like as far as radical poverty goes, it seems like the CFRs are up there. Um, and so, like, what do you make of the fact that their beards are so scraggly? I mean, you're saying they comb them, but they're pretty dang long.
Yeah.
Like,
So like it's one thing to uh in the Orthodox Church, for example, there's a tradition of priests growing their beard and not cutting their hair.
mm,
Right. It's a tradition. It's rooted in scripture that like the Levites, those who are consecrated to God, um, don't cut their hair.
yeah, yeah.
And so in that
Is
tradition,
Samson
like that
the
requires.
individual that when his hair was cut, all the power went?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right now,
Exactly.
realizing that
So
it wasn't actually flowing from his hair, but
exactly. So they do this, and what that requires, well, there's maintenance that's required. You got to
right,
comb your hair
right,
because otherwise, like you become unhealthy.
yeah,
And your hair actually becomes physically painful,
mm,
things like that. So like, go ahead and grow a beard, and you can have a big long beard. It can be a sign of austerity and rigor and everything, but you're still going to comb it to make sure that stuff isn't like stuck in there. It's part of grooming. It's part of
right,
cleanliness.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
you can live
I
in
like that.
austerity and still keep yourself clean.
Right,
And so like I can eat, but not overindulge. I can bathe,
mm,
but not become vain.
yeah,
we can
yeah,
we can
and
do
like
both things.
you can drink and not get to the point of drunkenness, right?
Exactly.
Like by extension, there's
When
a place for
we realize
temperance.
that exactly when we realize that the the extremes. Sometimes people will fast, and the fasting they do as a way of disciplining their body or as a way of doing penance, and that's fine. Right.
Hmm.
There's also nothing wrong with bodily penance. There's nothing wrong with those kinds of mortifications. But it's when we start to do it because I think my body is bad, therefore I need to punish myself.
Sure.
Then
Yeah.
we've shifted away from what is the Spirit? What is it that the Spirit tells us? The
Right.
Spirit offers us the spirit of adoption. Right? So come back to adoption, because adoption is what holds it all together. That we have been adopted into the family of God by virtue of our baptism, by virtue of
Hmm.
our faith in Jesus Christ. We are sons in the Son. And so adoption means that whatever we did not have before we came to faith in Jesus Christ, or whatever we cannot earn by our own merits, is given to us by the free and loving gift of God.
Mm.
So by adoption, we have been elevated to a dignity that was not ours. And so how would a parent who has adopted a child treat that child? As one of their own.
Hmm.
They might not be flesh of my flesh, but that adopted child is still one who I'm going to take care of as though it is my own child.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I want the highest good for them.
Right.
And that highest good the highest good, of course, is eternal life.
Right.
But wanting the good, willing the good for my adopted child may be something as simple as I'm going to make sure they have clean clothes to wear.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure
and
they
it's
eat.
like, right, our Lord talks about how, like, the Father knows every hair on our head, and he takes care of the sparrows, right? So it's like, this is why he would desire these things for us. I also like, you said clothes to wear, things to eat, but it's also like, it seems to me, I realize that there are orders that exist in the Catholic Church that deny some of these things. Like, I'm thinking specifically of, I don't know the name of the order, but there's like the bad haircut, that like some monks get. But like, I imagine that like in and of itself, again, right, that's because like, I imagine, I don't know this for sure, but I imagine one of the reasons that haircut is taken on is because it's supposed to cause humility, right? Because it's a bad haircut, right? And so like, the value comes in like giving up something that's good. You know what I mean?
So the practice of tonsure, that's what it's called.
Tonsure. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. In some of the monastic communities was a more sort of a more extreme tonsure, where they would like leave hair on the sides and in the front, but they would just like shave a really big bald spot.
Right. Yeah.
The
I don't have to
tonsure
worry
was
about
actually
that.
tonsure was like the first step towards holy orders.
Okay.
You receive tonsure, and they would really just like, I don't know, like a silver dollar size circle on your head they would shave.
Okay.
The idea was, it was this outward sign that you had been set apart for Christ.
Yeah,
or
sure.
that you were
Okay.
preparing for that consecration, that you were living that consecration.
Mhm.
So the tonsure was simply like a way of saying, this is it. Now, some of us are tonsured by nature.
That's right.
Right? So like I've got some thinness
Unfortunately.
coming over here. Yeah, exactly. Like the crown on my head is not as thick and luscious as it once was.
Yes.
With flowing locks. And so there's a sort of natural tonsure, and that's, sure, it's humility, but it's more than the humility part. It's meant to be an outward sign.
Right. Okay.
And
Okay.
this is where, again, like we realize that there are outward signs, physical signs that we might do. And this
Mhm.
goes all the way back, like Old Testament, there are the prophetic gestures, right? Sometimes the prophet does a thing to show the people, like Jeremiah famously takes the potter's jar and smashes it.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
And the people are watching him as he does this, and he's explaining to them what's going to happen to Israel if they don't repent. So there's these actions that the prophets will do. It's a physical outward sign.
Right.
The sacraments are physical outward signs that
Yes.
confer on us an interior grace, of course, but even the sacraments have that sort of tangible physical aspect. And so
Right.
the fact that I dress the way that I dress, that I wear black, that I wear the Roman collar, that I wear a cassock, the fact that a religious sister wears a habit, the fact that you wear a wedding ring, right? These are all outward signs that we put on that say something about who we are or what we're doing. Now, some of those things don't go as deep as the level of being. So if you're in a uniformed profession of some sort, like if you're a police officer and you put on the police uniform, there's more to your identity than policeman. You're more than that. But when you are wearing the uniform, there's the sense of you are now both the thing that your uniform indicates, you are a police officer, and you are functioning as such. But behind the uniform, there's a man or a woman. Just like I put on the Roman collar. Now, the difference is, even when I don't have the Roman collar on, I am still a priest.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't change for me.
Yeah.
Because the priesthood in this case is something that's not just a job. Like your marriage is not just something that exists when
if I
your
were to
wedding
take
ring
off
is
my
on.
wedding, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like you are still a married person. Like those are things that transcend our particular identity.
Yeah. And our appearance.
And at a spiritual level.
Yeah.
Right. At a level, this is where like a friend of mine who makes the argument that marriage may confer some sort of an ontological change. And I think that's a fascinating theological question to dive into. I'm not totally convinced that he's right, but there's something to his question that I think is very legitimate. And it may be like a development of how we express the theology of the sacrament of marriage. I don't know. But there's something cool there. And like that's in the realm of like speculative theology. So it's not anything that the church defines, but like that could be a cool conversation to have. It's maybe
if
not
I were
on a
to speculate
podcast,
on that for like 15 seconds, it would be that I have seen in the administration of the sacrament of the sick, right? I have seen a spouse receive the Eucharist because the two are one.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And so like there's something there as far as ontology goes, right? If someone can receive viaticum on behalf of another because they are a spouse, right? Like that seems to be at the order, at the level of being, right?
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, speculation over.
No, it's but like this is the thing. There's all this cool stuff that you can really get into and kind of dig around and you're gonna see these things that are they're real interesting.
So can I jump in or do you want to keep going?
Yeah, no, go for it.
So something that I guess 5-10 minutes ago you were saying about Orthodox priests not cutting their hair or their beards, right? One of the things that I was thinking was like, and I would argue this also goes for the CFRs, right? Like they've got these long beards, but they comb them. I can only assume that the CFRs also take showers. If let's say that like insert any kind of vocation, right? Like, but in the name of religion, someone stopped showering ever, and never cut their hair and never comb their hair. I could see easily where that would be a turnoff for a lot of other people, right? Like, like there's the danger in like religion getting a bad name because what you're doing is so counter to at least like today's modern culture. Like there's a level of cleanliness that is expected from people appearing in public, and so I could see how that would be
it's a social contract. Yeah, I'm with you.
No, but like even if you wanted to leave it at like that, like superficial of a level. Like that would be enough of a reason, I think. But the other thing that I was thinking of was as far as maintaining good health goes, because I feel the same way that I absolutely feel the obligation to be in good shape, to be strong, because I feel it is my duty to serve my wife and my children. And when I say serve my children, I guess I mean, well, first of all, they're very tiny right now. And so like I have to do most things for them, but also like set a good example, and serve our family
it's a good
as
idea.
a whole.
It's a good idea for you to have the physical strength required to hold them.
Yeah, and I want to go on public record and say idea. I do, but but the point being like since like I don't want to say that I've never put more of an effort into. Gaining strength, but I've never felt more of an obligation to do it. If I did
Hmm.
it before, it was probably out of some level of vanity. I mean, it's probably still out of some level of vanity, let's be honest. But also, like, I feel like it's an actual obligation for me to be strong for my family. And then the last thing I would say is in his Confessions, St. Augustine, I'm pointing back there because it's back there. Right before, I don't know if it's right before he gets baptized or right after he gets baptized, but he's kind of on a retreat, in this, like, in like a friend's house, him and a bunch of other people, and he has this toothache. and he, like, basically he, like, realizes how much it's impeding his prayer life.
Mm.
Like, he's struggling through it, and then, of course, like, almost what I felt like was like a throwaway comment, he talks about the people he's with praying over him, and he is miraculously cured of this toothache. It was like the most nonchalant way to talk about a miracle ever. But, like, it gets in the way of his prayer. And so, to that extent, something that I've recognized in my own life is that, like, all right, let's say that, like, for whatever reason, I've neglected cardio, for X amount of weeks. You can fill in whatever number you want, right? And that's even if I'm working out in another way. Like, if I've just, like, focused exclusively on lifting weights instead of doing any cardio at all, like, I will notice that, like, it actually impedes my ability to pray. And that's because, like, there's a certain amount of restlessness, I think, that comes from that.
Hmm.
And so, like, one of the reasons we need to focus on our bodily health is because if we don't take care of ourselves physically, we suffer spiritually, and I think you could say that full stop without even getting into the idea of, like, well, if I, like, fasting is something that has spiritual benefit to it. Like, literally, just if you feel terrible, it's going to be harder for you to pray.
Yeah,
What do you think?
that's exactly it. Well, this is why St. Paul writes the way that he does. The concern of the flesh is death,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas the concern of the spirit is life. What he's reminding us of again and again and again is that when we exclusively focus on our
Yeah.
bodies, on the flesh, on material things, we get so caught up in it that we forget the spirit, which leads to life, which leads to everlasting glory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
You can
I
do something.
suspect,
You could do something in the spirit, right, for the purpose of life that is bodily.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think I can't think of an example of this. So I don't think that there's much in St. Paul. There may be nothing in St. Paul, in fact. I can't think of a good example right now, but
Okay.
um, I don't think that anywhere Paul says that, uh, like, there's such a thing as too much spirit,
Mm.
right?
Right. Right.
Just like, oh, you're so focused on the spirit that you've completely neglected everything about the body, and, like, that's bad. I don't think he ever does that.
Right.
Um, that would be more of like a practical thing. So yeah, somebody who's doing this, if somebody's saying, I'm going to neglect everything about my body such that I no longer bathe, I no longer groom myself, I no longer take care of myself, I let my body go, um, and I'm doing this for spiritual reasons because I'm focused
Mm-hmm.
entirely on God. Okay, that may be
Right.
for you, but where it gets dangerous is if I start telling you, like, see how I'm not bathing, see how I'm fasting all the time, see how I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
this. You have to do that too. The only way for you to be as holy as I am is if you also do this. And that's often where we get into the, like, a difficulty. And I think it's not so much that there's ever been a teaching about this, it's that there's sometimes the perception. So, like, Vatican II did us a favor in talking about the universal call to holiness
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and reminding us that holiness is something that can be attained regardless of our state in life. It
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
begins with baptism. We begin that journey of holiness. It begins there, but all of us are capable of holiness, and all of us are called to holiness. There was sometimes the sense, and there still is sometimes the sense, that the only way for me to be holy is if I become a priest or a nun.
Yeah.
Like, I have to make the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience if I'm going to become holy. Otherwise, how could I possibly be a saint?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say St. Paul stands against that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
read what Paul says to to widows, to young men, all this. He says, I would like everybody to be able to be celibate as I am,
Mm-hmm.
because Paul himself was living celibacy. He said, however, if it's not good for you, then don't do it. Get married.
Right. Yeah.
But he also says the reason I would like this is because it's that the reason I would like that everybody could live celibacy is because it's this reminder of the eschatological reality that in heaven, all of our desires, physical, emotional, and spiritual, will be perfectly satisfied, and we will be one with Christ. And so we won't be in need of these human relationships in the way that we are now. And living celibacy, Paul says, is the thing that helps me to remember that. So I want everybody to be able to do that. But I also realize that that may not be something that's super practical for all of you. So
Right.
young men, if you get married, here's how to live marriage. Young women, if you're going to get married, here's how to live. You're not sinning if you do this. And Paul actually explicitly says, you do not sin if you get married. Like, he's really clear about this.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not sinful, this is a via negativa sort of thing. Well, it's not sinful, then there's goodness there, right? There's something good about this. And so anyway, this is like a convoluted sort of a way of getting to it, but that the flesh, these desires of the flesh, like, if we lose control of them, if we don't order them, if they're not subject to our reason and to our will, then we have a problem. But the Spirit allows us to live in a freedom. So, like, spiritually, let's say it's a Friday in Lent, or any Friday throughout the year. I try to do no meat on Fridays, right? Because the church actually says that we should.
Yeah.
The universal law of the church says go for meatless Friday. It's a good thing. So I believe in that. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
What's funny is now environmentalists have started talking about that because the production of meat does so much damage to the environment. What if we all just reduced our meat intake and just took, there was something like, what if we took one day a week, say Friday, and didn't eat meat every Friday? And you don't have to be a vegan, you don't have to be a vegetarian, but like, what if everybody just reduced their meat consumption? It took one day. And so I saw this as like in a social media thing, and somebody's response was, are you Catholic? Because that's a super Catholic thing to say.
That's like what we do.
Like all the time, right? So it's not there's anything wrong with meat. But like, what if I fast once a week, or abstain once a week from that? I'm not doing anything radical. I'm not doing anything that's overly difficult. But when I do it, and I'm thinking about that, what's happening is my desire for a cheeseburger is acknowledged.
Yeah.
I don't condemn myself when on a Friday I could really go for whatever the meat option would be on the menu.
Yeah.
Right?
Which, let's face it, that's how it goes every Friday.
Yeah. I am not to be condemned for that, and I know that I'm not condemned for it. But I also know that by saying no to meat that day, I'm doing something that's good. I'm making an offering to God. So there's a spiritual goodness that's present even as I say no to a physical, fleshly, material, bodily goodness. But I have freedom because I know that it's okay. I don't feel like my desire to have a cheeseburger on a Friday is a sign of my moral turpitude, right? Like, it's just I'm hungry, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And this is where you start, like, again, we're aiming at integration. The desires of the flesh, unsupervised, leads us in a bad direction.
Yeah.
The desires of the flesh, denied always, leads us in a bad direction.
Yes. Yes.
The desires of the flesh, understood and seen in their proper light, and integrated with our spiritual life, integrated with the will of God, subject to our reason and to the gift of God's grace, all of a sudden those material things, those physical things become very good. Taking care of your body, being healthy, eating healthy, exercising can become vanity.
Right.
I'm doing this because I want to look good, or it can become like the opposite of it is just the utter laziness of I don't care at all, so I'm not going to do anything. Or we can recognize that exercise is a moral responsibility. Eating well and healthy is a moral responsibility because
Right.
we are not our own.
Right. It's an act of
Like,
service.
yeah.
It's an
And
act
so
of
part of
service that could potentially be elevated to an act of worship, right? If you're
well,
doing it
because
out of love for God,
that's
right?
exactly it. That's because it's all about the law of self-gift, right? John Paul II talks about the law of the gift. If I'm supposed to give of myself, you are supposed to give of yourself. As a married man, Matt, you give of yourself to Renee and to your kids. And the way that you give of yourself is it's going to be in the body.
Hmm.
It's not just that you go to
It has
work
to be.
and yeah, like you go to work and money gets deposited in the bank account. That's
Right.
enough. That's how I give to my wife. No, of course, you never think that that's sufficient.
Yeah.
It's about your presence. Well, your presence is a physical presence,
Hmm.
right? And therefore, your health is something that's important. You have a responsibility to your wife and kids to take care of your health.
Hmm.
I'm a priest. The law of the gift applies to me also. I
Hmm.
give of myself and I give my body
Hmm.
to the people of my parish,
Hmm.
right? The
Hmm.
way that I do that is by being available to them. So like my physical availability to meet with them, to go to the hospital, to go to nursing homes, to sit and counsel people, to show up at their wake, at their funeral, at their wedding, whatever it is. Like that's how I'm able to give of myself to them. What that
Hmm.
means is I have to take care of my health. If I'm exhausting myself, if I'm not getting the rest that I need, if I'm eating poorly, if I'm not exercising, if I'm becoming physically unhealthy, I might have a problem. Like and priests, we're notorious. We don't want to go to the doctor. But you know what? Maybe I should. Maybe I should.
I think that might be a man thing. so
Valid point.
so how much of this, right? Because what you're saying there, like I think it's. I mean, I agree with you. Surprise, surprise. But but I do think so. I was listening to. I'm going to try and connect two ideas here. I was listening to a lecture through the Thomistic Institute a couple days ago, all about decision making, and uh, the man who was giving the lecture, whose name I forget, uh, was quoting an author whose name I also forget. Okay, so you should go look it up. I also don't know the name of the episode, but the phrase decision making is in it, okay? And it wasn't that long ago. Uh,
I'm going to give you
but,
guys the least amount of information I possibly can,
and
and
go.
good luck.
But he was quoting this author who was proposing that it is difficult for younger people to make decisions because they live in such a digitized age, and the internet age is kind of like things are always in the realm of possibility. And
Mhm.
so, like a guy is interested in a girl. Well, did you ask her out? No, no, I ended up not doing that. Well, there's like a good work opportunity that I can apply for. Did you fill out the application? No. Well, no. Well, why not? It's like, well, because younger people who grew up in the internet age see the world through the lens of possibility, but I guess less so like conviction, almost like actual action taken. Um, and so something that I think that's interesting in what we're talking about here, as far as uh, the need to serve, the obligation to serve, and to serve in a bodily way, right? Like I could see how that might decrease the understanding of the obligation to serve and to do so through the body might decrease because we live in a digital age.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
So my question is basically, what do you make of that? Right? Like, do you think that there has been a decrease in, it's almost like the vocation to serve, that like service is at the core of every vocation because we live in such a flat world, if you will.
Yeah, it's a I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we definitely don't have the time because I've only got a few minutes left before I'm going to have to
Okay.
run, to serve in the body, to take care of people.
Father, I would
You know,
I would keep you here all day if I could,
no,
Father.
my physical presence is going to be required.
Hmm.
Instead of what we're doing here, which is mediated by a screen,
I know.
and in this digital age, right?
Yeah.
No, but
Which
very
is
very
also like
seriously,
that's worth noting though, because it's not all bad, right?
this is the thing: the technology that we live with is not in and of itself an evil or the cause of the problem.
Hmm.
What happens is what certain lessons can be learned from the technology that we're using. So, for example, you might have people struggling in the romantic field, right? So, a young man is looking for a wife or wants to be in a relationship and is struggling. And part of the reason that he's struggling is he doesn't even realize it, but as he's going through the dating apps, there's always another option.
Hmm.
And without realizing it, he starts to worry, what if I make the wrong choice?
Mm.
What if the right choice was one more swipe
Swipe.
as I was
Oof.
scrolling, right? What if it was
Yeah.
just one more? What if I stop on the wrong one?
Yeah.
And so the fear of taking the first step because you might miss the right step ends up becoming paralyzing, and then they take no steps,
Mm.
right? Um, And so when the possibilities seem infinite, there are infinite women for this man to choose from. He chooses none of them.
Right.
Uh, Similarly, I think that the same thing can happen with work, but on both sides. So if I'm looking for a job, I can go looking through all the different job sites, all the different job postings, and suddenly I'm overwhelmed by the sheer number of jobs that are available
Right.
and this seeming infinity of work that I could do.
Yeah.
I can get a job doing almost anything. I don't want to get a job doing almost anything. I'm not that interested in doing things,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
there's this seeming infinity of work that I can do. Okay, that's very interesting. Um, but I need to pick the thing that I want to do. Similarly, if I'm an employer, it would seem that there's an infinite number of people who are looking for jobs. What if I pick the wrong one? I can fall into the same kind of trap. Um, and then there's and these are other attitudes that come in. You'll hear people talk about this all the time. You want me to work for little or no pay for a period of time, and you think that and when I say no to that job, it's because, well, young people don't want to work anymore. And it's like, the first job that you had coming out of college, did you get paid for it? And the answer is, yeah, you did. Yeah, but this is an opportunity. You could really meet a lot of people and you could advance. Doesn't matter. You still need to get paid,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I may not be in a position where I can afford, like, I have immediate needs.
Hmm.
You're focusing on the transcendent, like in this
Mm.
vast beauty of like the whole of your career. All these wonderful things can happen because of this moment, and this is something that's going to transcend it. And they're like, but I, in an imminent way, need to pay my electric bill this
Yeah.
month.
You could even argue that like
No, but
yeah.
if you think about it like this, I don't have infinite money, so I need to find a job that will pay me. But if everybody's looking for me to work for free, we've got a problem,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Even look, this all comes back to the gospel. Jesus says, "The laborer deserves his keep.
Hmm.
Eat what is set before you." St. Paul says, like, "I have worked among you. I haven't just come and been a freeloader. I've been working, but I've been working for you, and so you sustain me. You provide for my
Right.
needs, but
Right.
it's in return for something." So, like, as a priest, look, I I I don't have much in the way of needs.
Hmm.
And I would be quite content to not take a salary if every other possible expense I could have I knew was going to be covered.
Yeah.
The reason I take the salary is because, well, I don't expect the people in my parish to like make my car payment. I
Yeah.
don't expect the people in my parish to buy me new shoes,
Yeah.
right? But you know what? I can't, with the salary that I earn, afford to live where I live.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't make enough money for that.
Hmm.
And so part of the cost of me being here is actually I'm earning my living,
Hmm.
literally the house that I live in,
Yeah.
by the work that I do as a priest, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I
So
really like this. I really like this is why your friends, describe you as imminent. Um, I think that's a really good point that flies under the radar for a lot of people. The idea of getting lost in possibility. Uh,
yeah, and
Even like that,
this is
just future possibility, period.
in the Screw Tape Letters. I used this the other night. I did a talk for the diocesan guilds on spiritual warfare.
Mhm.
Um, I'll see if I can get a recording of it, and
Yeah,
maybe
that'd
we
be
can
cool.
put it out as a
Totally,
separate episode or something.
totally.
Um, but I did this talk, and I used something from the Screw Tape Letters, where Screw Tape, writing to Wormwood. Remember, C.S. Lewis writes Screw Tape Letters as letters between demons. So
Hmm.
uh, with he says things that were like, that's bad, and it's like, yeah, that's the point. We're
Yeah,
supposed to
yeah,
notice these bad things.
yeah.
But one of the ideas is get the subject to focus on anything other than eternity, and so get them to focus on the past,
Mm.
um, and get them to focus most of all on the future. And Lewis says, because the challenge, there's a possibility of virtue when they focus on the past or on the present.
Hmm.
Virtue, because in the past, if you look at the past, you might be inspired to gratitude. In the present, the person can recognize the presence of God and the glory of God. But if they're focused on the future, that is like this imagined thing that they want, they're focused on their own desires, on this
Mm.
thing that they're hoping to get.
Hmm.
And then they can always be dissatisfied with the future. He said the future is the thing least like eternity, right?
This is why C.S. Lewis is one of the all-time greats. I
Oh,
have to
it's
chew on
just
that
this
for like a
brilliant
day.
line. Yeah.
Yeah.
The future is the thing least like eternity because it's entirely imagined.
Yeah,
And it's
it's
dependent on what
fully
I
not
do.
real. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas when we're looking at the eternal, again, this comes back to Romans chapter 8, St. Paul, the flesh and the spirit, not as in the sense of being absolutely, completely, and totally uh, irreconcilable,
Hmm.
but rather sometimes we notice that the flesh and the spirit are opposed to one another because the spirit is trying to get us to where we need to go, and the flesh is trying to keep us here. The spirit is trying to lead us into eternity, and the flesh is trying to lead us into the future.
Hmm.
Right?
Okay.
So Lewis uses these descriptions. He's like the things that we're the vices that we fall into, um, avarice, gluttony, drunkenness, lust. He says all of these things are about the future. So if I'm greedy, it's because I'm looking to the future, to like the stuff that I want to get
Mm.
later. So I want this thing. And so I start looking for ways to get there. But of course, the more I become greedy, I'm always looking for more. I'm never going
Hmm.
to be
Hmm.
satisfied with what I have.
Hmm.
Um, he even says like lust is the only problem with lust is that the pleasure is thrown in, but the pleasure is the thing that the enemy gave us. Meaning, again, Lewis is writing from the perspective of a demon. So whenever he writes in Screw Tape Letters, whenever he writes enemy, he's talking about God.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so this is like the really fascinating thing. He says lust is that thing that the sin is in the desiring and the
Mm.
grasping at it. He goes, unfortunately, the pleasure is the thing that God had originally given when this bodily function is used appropriately,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like the proper ordering of the body is meant to bring pleasure. But
Yeah.
lust distorts all of that. And he goes, unfortunately, we haven't figured out a way to remove the
Right.
pleasure part of it. But by the
Yeah.
time the pleasure comes, the sin has already been committed. And you're like, oh,
Right.
that's a really interesting way to see it.
There's also the fact of the matter is that there will be no pleasure in hell too, right? So like,
Yeah,
as far as
exactly.
a deterrent goes for desiring to escape your addiction to lust and embrace chastity, it's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The world's argument of choosing lust, and I suppose the pleasure that accompanies it instead of God is like totally a false argument. There's no pleasure in hell,
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly. Anyway,
Wow.
The flesh
Okay.
and the spirit, we have to contend with these things. But remember, St. Paul is talking about the reconciliation of flesh and spirit, and that when we are living in the spirit, the body is free.
Yeah.
And we're no longer slaves to our passions, but rather we're in that union with Christ that allows us to
Right.
be with him forever.
Amen. I also just think that this a nice little tag here is that, like, I'm sure it was obvious, but the theology of the body was vital to this conversation, right? So,
Oh
like,
this is all informed by John Paul II's
right.
personalism, theology
And
of the
so,
body,
like,
everything. Yeah.
Right. If
Even
one
if
is
we're not
interested
citing
in,
it directly.
right. If one's interested in learning about this, like, that's
on.
the place to go. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Hey, thanks, Father Sam. Thanks for sticking around.
You got it.
Even though you had
pleasure.
to go and be somewhere in person.
I got to go be somewhere in person now. Great
All
to see
right,
you, man.
me too.
God bless
Peace.
you. Peace.
Bye. Thanks for watching today's video. Let us know what you thought down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.